So this last week, I got my Rippaverse comics, the Rippazine and Yaira #1 from the Yaira campaign, which was written by Jen and Sylvia Soska and art by Deborah Karta. So this is the first book for the hero Yaira. She's some kind of god or alien that came to Earth during the time of the Vikings. She's seemingly immortal because she is still alive in the modern day and works as a scientist for Projexis, which is the company that Altona, Isam's sister, works at. And she becomes friends with Yaira very early on in the book. A young girl who is involved in some gang activity. She's in the middle of like a heist one day when she gets some powers that awaken, and it's a big spectacle, and she has powers like Yaira, and immediately after that, Yaira goes to confront this girl, and that's when Yaira's confronted by some beings who are seemingly from the same planet or realm or whatever that she's from. That's not really revealed where these people are from. And they're saying they've come to, take her in for justice, and they fight. And the girl, whose name is Stephania or Stefania, not really sure yet, she gets away and unfortunately gets caught by Alpha Core. Meanwhile, Yaira takes the fight with her people, and their people are also joined by this monster-like bug creature. She takes them to an oil field that she blows up in their faces to try and, distract them and get away. After that, Yaira goes to work for a little bit, and she then tracks down the girl who's in a prison being held by Alpha Core, who's trying to negotiate with her. And she breaks the girl out of prison, beating up Solari of Alpha Core, kind of their Superman, and getting away with the girl, taking her back to her secret lair, where she has Stefania's grandma, which she got earlier in the issue, whom she got early in the issue. But it's not really a secret lair because the big monster bug guy's there and he's killed the grandma, which Stefania's really mad about and blames Yaira for. So then Yaira fights the bug man, and he wounds her by shooting an energy beam through her. And she ends up getting away in the end and sneaking into Projexis to try and heal herself, and Altona ends up finding her and helps her and stitches her up, and she's able to confide in her. And so after that, she and Altona work together to make this sort of aerosol, which is supposed to incapacitate these bugs that the monster bug guy released, which are like killer bugs. And then she goes to fight Alpha Core, who has Stefania again. And she also attracts the people from her planet or realm or whatever. And there's a big brawl between all of them. She ends up getting away with Stefania again. She takes Stefania to Projexis, who releases some aerosol or something to kill all the killer bugs. And she leaves Stefania at Projexis with Altona, who locks her up. And then she flies away. And we get a history dump as to her origins exactly. When she showed up in the Viking era, had a bunch of kids. So she's a mom and has tons of ancestors still. And we end up learning she goes to see Solari to kind of call a truce to some degree, and tells him pretty much that Stefania's one of her ancestors, and so that kind of is why she has her powers, I imagine. And then she goes to fight the people from her planet in Iceland at a volcano. I forget exactly what the volcano name was, and she ends up beating them using the volcano. And in the end, she gets kind of blasted away by the volcano into the sea, and she's about to die but gets saved by somebody, and we end up learning that's Neptune. And when she wakes up, she has a new outfit on, which is like a godly armor, but just kind of strange because he probably changed her while she was sleeping. Then after that, we learn that Stefania was recruited to Alpha Corps, and she wants to kill Yaira, get back at her, so that's the end of the issue, and we'll see what happens in number 2. Okay, so I have to say that this is probably my least favorite story of the Rippaverse so far. And it's just simply that I think the story was poorly executed. I think this would have been better as 2 books, or maybe even 3. There was a lot jam-packed into this story. And just a simple way to sum it up is there were 5 fights, and there was one single page, single-sided page, and then one splash page. And those are the only ones without dialogue or inner monologue on them, which is just, it was a lot of writing, a lot of reading, which, I was happy to absorb a lot of it. I think it's pretty cool, a lot of it. I think it isn't a well-executed origin story, per se, and I don't think it really intended to be either. But that's kind of what I'm looking for to some degree. But, aside from that, too, that's just my personal preference. Really, just the story it was a lot in one. There was very little time between fights, so as to explain, how people were feeling even. And it's not that there needs to be a heavy focus on the feelings, but if somebody's just going from fight to fight to fight, then really there's not much to the character there. Some really positive elements is the femininity they explored with Yaira. She's a mother, grandmother, great-grand, she's been around for thousands of years, so she has a lot of people on this planet that she's produced, which is kind of cool. There was some talk about God in there, which was cool to see explored, especially in this aspect where she's kind of a god or an alien, and how she deals with that. That's an interesting concept. And there was some really good art. The splash page I talked about was really good. There was this one page where she is like summoning a storm too, and I think it's shortly after the splash page. It looks great. Really good stuff in a lot of ways. I think it could have been spread out over a lot more, just so as to explore it a bit more and develop the character a bit more, because it really seems like we're just being told who the character is and what's going on, versus seeing it for ourselves and just letting the art speak for itself, versus a lot of dialogue over fights, which is kind of clunky a lot of times. It's often what gets messy about Spider-Man stories, that he's constantly talking throughout the entirety of the fight. It makes it a little weird. But that aside, I definitely like the book. I'm going to pick up number 2. And yeah, I suggest everybody does and show it to people. I really think this is worth supporting, regardless of whether or not it's the best stuff out there. So now just a few words on the Rippaverse in general. Kind of going to Oreo it. Good, bad, good to some degree, and I don't have a lot of bad. But the good is, I guess, I just love the idea of this. It's that somebody's providing an alternative to Marvel and DC, who the companies which have been kind of eaten out by a bunch of crazy politics ideas and just madness in general. And so it's nice to see somebody not only doing their own thing, but doing it in a very successful way, to say, it doesn't have to just be this one way. There are alternatives. So that in itself, I think, is something always worth supporting. Just the competition alone. Another thing that I really love about it is that it is it's a punk rock movement kind of thing. in which it's like punk rock, it's built by real fandom. It's built by people who really enjoy what's going on. So everybody loves punk rock, and that's the only reason why punk rock exists. It doesn't get played on the radio, really. And there's a few popular punk rock bands, but they're not something that people hear a lot about. And that's kind of like this Rippaverse thing. You're not seeing it everywhere, and I don't think it needs to be shown everywhere. I see it on Twitter a good bit, but that's because I follow the people who make it. But, aside from that, it's just kind of built by a fandom, a very organic movement of people who enjoy this stuff, and that's very awesome to see. When it comes to the bad, I would say that, like Yaira, a lot of the books have been, I think, lacking in story quality, and it's not that the story itself it's bad, it's that there's not enough character background given. And I think part of that is to build a mystery, and I'm sure Eric July has plans and good ideas, and I'm sure in the end it'll all pay off. I'm excited to see what happens, but a lot of the stories so far have been kind of leaving me wanting, as far as like, what are the powers? Where did this come from? What is the history behind this? Kind of like this Yaira issue. It's like I said, I really feel like we need just at least one good origin story for a character, following them from kind of beginning into the beginning of their journey into this superhero world, versus it being a bunch of well-established things that are going on, because we're just kind of picking up in the middle of the story, it feels like, without ever having been given an opportunity to really be introduced to this stuff. It almost feels like the writers are writing Marvel or DC characters, meaning characters that have history, whereas these characters, somebody needs to do a definitive story for them, because all these stories so far seem more like just continuity stories, nothing that's going to be the big bold thing that really introduces this person to the world and to the audience. Aside from the bad, which, like I said, I don't think that's that bad. I'm still excited to see how it pays out. There might be a plan, and I kind of think there is, because Eric July's talked a lot about that stuff. But aside from all that, I'm going to continue supporting these books no matter what, and buying them until there's just some sort of drop off, and I don't expect that. But if there is, then I'll stop buying them. But I really like the idea, and the art is pretty darn good in a lot of these books. There's some issues with it, and I think it might have to do with some of the inking. Although, this is 4 books that they've put out, plus the Ripazine, which has a 13-page story with Bart Sears, who I'm pretty sure did all the art by himself. But, and all those books, that's 4 books. That's not a lot. That's not a lot of experience with the tools they're working with and the system they're working with, the printing, which, to be said too, another great quality. These books are high quality. The paper's great. The covers are thick. It's just got a lot in it that is very enjoyable as far as just the product quality. And aside from only one of the books, I'm pretty sure, none of the books have any egregious advertisements in the story. And even the one that has an advertisement, it's an advertisement. So, like I said, the other ones are good because they don't have them. This one does. So, take that for what it is. But it's Eric July's wife's company. So, if I had a wife, and I'd put her company in my comic book, that's just being a smart husband. But aside from that, they're great quality product. And just recently with the Yaira campaign, he was saying that he built his own printing operation, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And if not printing, at least it's distribution network. So he's really building his own empire here, and he's also, I'm pretty sure in the back of the book, advertising that he can help do this for other creators. So really what he's doing, aside from even the comic books, the fact that these comic books are supporting this great thing that he's working on is really awesome, and I hope that it continues moving forward in this direction. Like I said, I'm going to continue to support these books no matter what, and I in fact suggest them to other people. I even have talked to a few comic book store owners about them, and how perhaps they should purchase a stack of 10 maybe of some of the books to sell and get people interested in them, and perhaps even contact Eric. I don't have his contact information personally. I'm not out here shilling for Eric July, really. It's just I really like this concept, and I want to see some competition really injected into the market. And I think this is a great way to do that. And it's also just a great way to get people excited about comics again. Like the campaign things that he's been launching, really cool. It's really awesome, a lot of the things he's built around this. And I think that, if even if this doesn't, take out Marvel or DC or, replace them completely, which I don't really think would be the best thing in the world, but even if it doesn't accomplish, becoming the #1 comic book distributor or seller in the world, I think it would be really cool for this to get a lot of attraction and become a very serious alternative. Because even though I really like Image Comics is somewhat infected by similar things from what I've read, and I can't say that reliably entirely, so that's speculation, or that would be whatever you might call it, allegedly. That's what it is. That's an alleged claim, but I've heard there are problems there as well, and that might just be due to individuals working within certain projects. But overall, I think this is a really cool alternative because it really does put a lot of power into creators' hands. And yeah, I think Eric's found magic with what he's done here. And so I just hope that it continues moving forward. Aside from that, the Gooding, and I think that's how it's pronounced, Gooding the Polymath campaign is supposed to begin very soon. And I'm going to get in on it very early. I got on the Yaira one on the last day, and as a result, my Yaira book was probably one of the last ones to be shipped. So I kind of want to get in early on this one so I can release a video early on, and I probably won't be talking about as much story in that first video just so as not to spoil. But at this point, like I said, I'm one of the last people to receive the book, and it's been about a week, so I don't think I'm going to be spoiling anything for anybody who's really serious about reading these books. And I really do hope anybody who's watching this goes out and picks up every Rippaverse book, because honestly, just even if they're not the greatest stories as far as you're concerned, I think there's some good stuff in there. They are worth picking up just to support. So thank you very much for checking in, and I'll be back with more.